Praise be to the one true God, the Lord of all realms of existence. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and may the grace of the Most High God be forever in your favor. Welcome to our continued exegetical analysis of Chapter 2 of the Quran, Surat al-Baqarah. In this video, we are going to be covering verses 30 to 33, which address the pre-appointment of man as God's representative on earth and the conversation between Allah and the angels. The tale of Adam is narrated 5 times throughout the Quran, across 5 different chapters. Here in Chapter 2, Chapter 7, Chapter 15, Chapter 20, and finally Chapter 38, with each retelling providing more details that relate to the context in which the story is found. In this chapter, the story of Adam and the fall is covered from verse 30 to verse 39, and is broken down into 3 separate phases. Phase 1 covers verses 30 to 33, and it deals with the pre-appointment of man as God's representative on earth, and the conversation between Allah and the angels, as well as their objection to Adam's subsequent appointment. Phase 2 covers verses 34 to 36, and it deals with Iblis' arrogance and disobedience, as well as man's temptation in the garden. Phase 3 covers verses 37 to 39, and it deals with Adam's fall from grace and the aftermath of that fall, as well as God's instructions to man following his exile from the garden. As we progress throughout this series, we will uncover more and more details pertaining to this narrative as it relates to its context. In this current context, however, we encounter the story of Adam right after Allah poses a rhetorical question that we discussed in the previous video: how man can act with ingratitude to Allah when he had been non-existent and God brought him into existence. This question relates to the story of Adam and the fall in such a way that in this tale we encounter 2 of God's fallible beings who had been given God's grace, as well as their response to and acknowledgement of that grace. The overarching theme that runs throughout the narrative is that of ingratitude, i.e., kufr, a term that we have already covered in verse 6 of this chapter, a term referring to a character trait espoused by those whom the Quran refers to as ladhina kafaru, meaning those who act perfidiously. These people, according to verses 6 to 20, are individuals who espouse an insincere and ungrateful response to the grace of Allah, and who misuse what Allah has given them for other than what Allah has intended. In other words, they refuse to acknowledge and appreciate the intent of God's favor, and as a result, they shun God's guidance and instructions in favor of misguidance and deviance. These individuals, according to these verses, outwardly profess fidelity to Allah and the last day, but yet lack sincerity and genuine faithfulness in their hearts. They portray a devious scheme to deceive others with their tongues, whereas their hearts harbor nothing but mischievous intents. This motif of hiding or concealing or suppressing is also captured in the term kufr, as this term also embodies the act of covering or obscuring something, here in particular one's true identity or intent in order to outwit another. In the story of Adam and the fall, Iblis is said to have been the one who was eventually led astray due to his perfidiousness and inability to overcome his pride, jealousy, and envy towards man. From verses 6 to 29, man is discouraged of the pitfalls that ensue from acting perfidiously with regards to Allah and his signs. In the upcoming verses in this series, however, we are going to be treated to a first-row seat on certain characters who exemplified perfidiousness amongst our predecessors, starting at the very beginning of human history, and then to the first people selected by God as a nation, the children of Israel. The intent of these narratives is not to shame or revile the previous peoples, but a way for us who encounter the Quran to relate and understand, as well as avoid the dangers that result from acting with ingratitude to Allah. By reading these narratives, we can try and avoid repeating the same mistakes, and consequently conduct ourselves with understanding and genuine affection towards others. So with that introduction out of the way, let us conduct a detailed analysis of these verses. Exegetical analysis of verses 30 to 33 of Surat al-Baqarah. In the name of the one true God, Ar-Rahman, the Merciful. Recall, O Muhammad, when thy Lord said to the angels, I am surely going to place a representative upon the earth. They said, Art thou really going to place thereon someone who is going to create disharmony in it and sheds blood? Whereas we extol thy glory by praising thee, and we sanctify thee. He said, I am surely better knowing of what you do not know. And he taught Adam the names, all of them. Then he presented them before the angels and said, Inform me of the names of these, if you happen to be credible. They said, Glory be to thee. We do not have knowledge, save for the knowledge of that which thou hast taught us. Assuredly, it is indeed thee. Thou art the knowing, the wise. He said, O Adam, inform them of their names. So when Adam had informed them of their names, God said, Did I not say to you angels that I know the mysteries of the heavens and the earth, and that I know what you reveal and what you have been concealing? Verse 30 begins with the phrase, Recall, O Muhammad, which is a repeated narrative style of how Allah initiates a narrative in the Quran. The addressee here is implied to be the messenger, hereby instructed to make mention of or to recount the following narrative to the listeners of the Quran. In other words, relate to them, O Muhammad, of the incident when such and such a thing took place, that such and such being, when thy Lord said to the angels. Allah's declaration to the angels about his intention of setting up a vicegerent or a representative on the earth has led some to suggest that the earth might have been inhabited by other human beings who had long passed prior to Adam's appointment. The reason for this attestation is due to the usage of the word Khalifa for representative or vicegerent, which literally implies a successor or someone who comes after or someone who assumes the role of another. Though there may be reason to lean towards this understanding, the Quran seems rather silent on whether this is true or not. Another meaning might suggest that man was to assume a role that was previously held by the angels or other metaphysical beings. In other words, the angels might have been the sole representatives on the earth. However, with the arrival of man, the role of representative fell upon man. This might also link back to the verse mentioned in chapter 33, verse 72 about the trust, which was granted to man. After the mountains, the heavens, and the earth all declined to bear it because they were afraid of the eventual consequences that might result from failing in upholding that trust. Man, however, according to this verse, betook the trust upon himself because he happens to be an ignorant wrongdoer. Similarly, another candidate for the predecessor of man might have been what the Quran refers to as John, a term which is typically translated as jinn. The Quran is not entirely explicit as to what this creation is. However, in verse 27 of chapter 15, the Quran seems to indicate that the John had been created prior to man from a scorching fire, as opposed to man, who had been created from a dampened and moist clay, of a transformed, putrefied, murky substance. Thus, we may infer from this verse that the John might have been the representatives of God on earth prior to the arrival of man, which might also explain Iblis' apprehension and later on defiance from paying homage to man. Likewise, the term Khalifa may be indicative of successive authority, indicating that Adam and his descendants were to be appointed as stewards or representatives of Allah on earth. In my understanding, however, there might be more validity with these latter positions of a metaphysical representation, either angelic or similar thereto, as opposed to the former, i.e., that of other human beings. Though, however, each position has its strengths and weaknesses and should thereby not be dismissed blatantly. Verse 30 continues to inform us that upon hearing Allah's declaration, the angels were quick to point out what they assumed to have been a hiccup in God's intent, namely that it would seem counterintuitive to place a being capable of disharmony, disruption, and bloodshed upon the earth, whereas they were in a better position for the task. One thing to take note in this reply is the reasoning they provided for why they would better suited for the task. This lends even further credence to the interpretation provided earlier of how man was to replace the angels as the representative on earth. This objection also informs us that the angels were incapable of shedding blood and creating mischief on earth, and that they had kept the earth in a pure and harmonious state before man's arrival. Everything was perfect, according to them, which seemed even the more bizarre why God would suddenly then replace them with another successor, one who would disrupt the earth, shed blood, and not give glory to God. This seemed unreasonable to them, and so they protested. Another thing to note in this narrative is that mischief-making and glorification of God are used as two polar opposites, particularly in the angel's response. Art thou really going to place thereon someone who is going to create disharmony in it and sheds blood, whereas we extol thy glory by praising thee, and we sanctify thee? This reflects the angel's perception of the potential for man to misuse their free will and engage in wrongdoing. Allah's response to the angel's concerns in the verse underscores then his divine knowledge and wisdom, here expressed in the phrase, "I am surely better knowing of what you do not know," indicating his comprehensive understanding of the future and his reasons for appointing man as his vicegerent on earth. This verse suggests that man has been entrusted with the responsibility to maintain justice, righteousness, and harmony on earth, despite his potential for corruption. The angel's statement is intended to mean that those who extol the glory of God by praising him do not indulge in the crimes that have been mentioned in the response. In other words, the angels are claiming in the statement that those who exalt the praises of God and sanctify him do not profane or desecrate what God stands for, that being harmony, balance, and equilibrium. Verse 31 states that Allah taught Adam the names, all of them, indicating that Adam was endowed with knowledge and intellect, enabling him to comprehend and distinguish between various objects and entities. The Arabic word used for name is ism, and it can also be understood as identifier. The act of teaching Adam the names signifies Allah's role as the ultimate source of knowledge and wisdom, highlighting his ability to impart knowledge to his creation and demonstrating his intimate relationship with man. After teaching Adam the names, Allah presents the entities to which the names belong to the angels and challenges them to identify the names of the entities shown to them, demonstrating his authority and his desire to test the angels' knowledge and understanding. The verse then reveals that the angels were unable to identify the names of what was presented to them, underscoring the superiority of Adam in terms of knowledge and intellect, as well as the unique status granted to man. The interrogation of the angels serves as a test of their knowledge and truthfulness, compelling them to demonstrate their understanding and exposing the limitations of their knowledge compared to Adam's. While each creation understands its own functions, they lack awareness of how other things operate. In contrast, man possesses the capacity to acquire knowledge of the functions and interrelations of various entities, as well as the ability to form new concepts by combining existing knowledge. The narrative of Allah teaching Adam the names suggests that man is not only capable of naming things and acquiring language, but is also a learning creature, with God assuming the role of teacher, an aspect of God often overlooked when discussing his attributes. The central theme of this narrative is to foreshadow man's unique ability to learn and reason through intellect, particularly its mastery of language and articulation. For it is through language that man can comprehend the unknown, and through articulation, it can manifest the unknown into the known. In chapter 96, verses 1 to 5, man is called upon to engage his faculty of articulation, to read, as his Lord is the most honorable or generous, underscored in his imparting of knowledge unto man through the pen, as through the pen, God taught man what he did not know. This emphasizes the crucial role of writing and reading in acquiring and passing down knowledge from one generation to the next. Consequently, it is plausible to infer that Adam's acquisition of knowledge, including the naming of the entities, may have involved the use of writing and reading. Should this interpretation hold true, it would challenge the already established traditional perspective on the genesis and development of man, and would further suggest that Adam could simply symbolize the Adamite race, rather than an exclusive individual. According to this preposition, God created the Adamite race and entrusted it with the role of acting as representative or vicegerent on earth. Over time, the Adamite race gradually progressed, acquiring knowledge and understanding of its environment through natural curiosity, comparable to the curiosity of a newborn baby during the first few years of its development. The Adamite race would have naturally explored its surroundings, absorbing sensory experiences and learning from them. Each new sensation would have presented an opportunity for learning, with the Adamite race absorbing as much information as its capacity allowed. Through the mind's memory capabilities, the Adamite race would have started to recognize and retain certain phenomena, eventually forming patterns and behaviors, likely contributing to its eventual development of language and articulation, and enabling it to express its comprehension of the world through writing and documentation. The phrase, "if you are truthful," suggests that God was testing the angels' understanding of man's nature. If the angels' assumptions about man were accurate, they should have been able to identify the entities presented to them. This reinforces the notion of not judging a book by its cover, meaning not hastily judging someone without comprehensive knowledge of their character. While the verse does not specify the entities presented to the angels, it's plausible that they were related to the angels' previous objections. Just as the angels were capable of identifying certain aspects of man as evil, Adam likely discerned the same, along with additional elements indicating his superior understanding above the angels. The angels' response, "We do not have knowledge, except for the knowledge of what thou hast taught us," reveals their limited ability to draw conclusions based on their observations. Although they recognized God's aversion to disharmony and bloodshed, they overlooked man's potential for learning. God values quality over quantity, even if only one individual ended up exhibiting virtue, and for this possibility alone, he deemed it worthwhile to create man and appoint him as his representative. His response, "I am better knowing of what you do not know," highlights his superior knowledge and wisdom. When Allah taught Adam the names and presented them to the angels, it showcased man's capacity for growth and development. While man may engage in wrongdoing, he also possesses the ability to learn, evolve, and surpass his previous self and better his outcome. This is exemplified in the aftermath of Adam's fall from grace, a topic which we will explore at a later time. The angels' reply to Allah's inquiry in verse 32 underscores their realization of their limited understanding and their ability to yield to God's wisdom. They affirm, "It is indeed thee, thou art the knowing, the wise," acknowledging that only Allah possesses the ultimate knowledge and wisdom to make decisions beyond their comprehension. This response reflects their acceptance of God's decree and their humility in recognizing his superior wisdom. Their glorification of the Lord's greatness furthermore demonstrates their unwavering devotion to him, even in situations where they may not fully grasp his intentions. Whereas their acknowledgement of his attributes serves as a model for the faithful to maintain reverence and devotion to God, regardless of their understanding of his plans. This interaction with the angels provides a valuable lesson for the faithful on how to conduct themselves when faced with situations beyond their comprehension. It teaches that questioning or harboring reservations about Allah's plan is not inherently wrong. However, it is essential to maintain trust and fidelity to his wisdom and judgment. Instead of allowing doubt or confusion to erode faithfulness, the faithful should instead strive to deepen their trust in Allah and seek guidance through seeking knowledge and further understanding. Ultimately, the angel's response exemplifies humility, reverence, and devotion to Allah's wisdom, serving as a model for the faithful to emulate in navigating life's uncertainties and challenges. Verse 33 imparts to us that when Adam had informed the angels of the names, Allah declares unto the angels, "Did I not say to you that I know the mysteries of the heavens and the earth, and that I know what you reveal and what you have been concealing?" Underscoring his comprehensive knowledge of all hidden matters and manifestations. Allah reminds the angels of his prior declaration regarding his knowledge of the unseen, highlighting one of his attributes, namely, knower of the ghaib, which refers to his knowledge of the unseen or the hidden. Throughout the Quran, Allah repeatedly asserts his knowledge of the unseen, affirming his authority and wisdom. In chapter 6, verse 59, Allah declares, "With him are the keys to the unseen. None knows them except him, for he knows whatever is on land and in the sea. Not a single leaf falls, except that he knows it, nor is there a seed of grain in the folds of darkness, nor in the earth, be it in the moist parts or in the dry, except that it is in a definitive record." This verse illustrates Allah's absolute knowledge of everything in the heavens and the earth, whether seen or unseen, and his control over all affairs. This Quranic narrative of Adam and the angels serves as a profound lesson for man, as it demonstrates Allah's superiority over his creation and underscores the importance of humility and devotion before him. Despite the angels' noble status and obedience, Allah reminds them of his ultimate knowledge and wisdom, establishing his authority over them. In summary, these verses affirm the importance of learning and seeking knowledge, as well as provide us with profound insights into Allah's decree to appoint man as his vicegerent on earth. Furthermore, the verses highlight the angels' concern about man's potential for corruption and Allah's reassurance of his knowledge and wisdom. The verses underscore themes of divine sovereignty, human responsibility, and the limitations of angelic understanding. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you in the next video, where we shall be covering the story of the eventual fall of man from grace. Remember to subscribe to the channel and like the video, and as always, may the grace of God continue to forever be in your favor.